You know, when I was in high school, I had this amazing American Studies class that looked at the intersection between literature and history. And I never, did anything with it. I didn't major in that in college or pursue that professionally, but I think it always stayed with me, the idea that there was this link between the two of them, and that they could help you understand, each, if you read Moby Dick or, James Fenimore Cooper or something like that, those kinds of books help you understand the historical period, and vice versa, that history can seem a little dry at times, but if you look for the kinds of novels or nonfiction books that were written in the period, that can really make the time come alive in ways that you never expected. I'd read her books as a kid and loved them, and always found them quite soothing, which I think is something that a lot of people talk about in their response to the books, which is actually sort of weird because they're about, these terrible natural disasters. And so it makes you wonder why, what is it about them that is so kind of satisfying, which I think in some ways is about, their descriptions of process, of how to build a log cabin and how to make a door and, all those kinds of things that kids love. But as an adult, I came to write about them 20-some years ago. There was a kind of scandal in the literary world that broke out over the issue of authorship, because a biography of Wilder's daughter, the journalist Rose Wilder Lane, was published that claimed that she was actually the author of the books and not her mother. And that was something that I wrote about at the time. And that led then, some years later, to my editing the Little House books for the Library of America. So that was kind of the journey that I went on, unbeknownst to me at the time. One of the exciting things that I came to understand as I was writing the book was the kind of relationship between Rose's early career as a quote unquote journalist and the later books. It turns out that Rose was actually a yellow journalist, and somebody who was really writing fiction, but pretending it was fact, publishing this stuff, a lot of which was kind of celebrity journalism, celebrity biographies in the San Francisco Bulletin. San Francisco, of course, was the kind of hotbed of yellow journalism because that's where William Randolph Hearst was from. And he got his start there. And so the whole town was pretty profoundly influenced by that in terms of its newspapers. And that was something that I had never, I understood that Rose was a real character, but I did not know that that was what she was involved in. I mean, there are so many kind of unexamined assumptions about settlement, as it has been called, and the role of white settlers spreading out across the West. And I think people are familiar with terms like manifest destiny, but I don't think that when it comes to like the Little House books that they have really looked at what that means. And the relationship between white settlers and Indians and how that went so horribly wrong, and what that has meant in terms of the way that whites have just assumed that the whole process was a positive one, that it somehow ended up in economic success. It did not. In many ways, it was not an economic success or a success in other ways. And we like to believe in this fantasy. The original idea of the American dream had to do with land, with having your own land and supporting your family on it. And yet very few people were able to do that successfully. Even just looking at my own family, who were all, immigrants to the Midwest and farming people. It was an incredibly hard life, and something that did not turn out well for thousands and thousands of people. So, especially with our, current relationship to farming, the way that we kind of assume that it's, that it's all taken care of by, and we have this sort of rosy idea of organic farming and so forth. But I think a lot of us don't realize that it's almost impossible to make a living for most people, and it always has been the case. So I hope it just inspires people to kind of take a closer look at some of those fond fantasies that we have about our past. Oh, it was wonderful. It was something that really kind of came out of the blue, and I hadn't been that aware of the prize before. My publisher, Sarah Burstell, had known about it because one of her previous books about Padre Pio had won the prize a few years back, so she was well aware of it. But yeah, it's a fantastic honor to be a finalist, and so yeah, it was a real thrill.